Every time there's a new Nintendo console, I'm always super curious to see what the next Super Smash Bros. Game will be like. But this time there's a lot of factors that make it really hard to predict what direction they'll take with this franchise. So first, let's talk about Sakurai's involvement. I think this will be the first Smash game ever to not be directed by Sakurai. And here's why. Over the years, there's been multiple interviews and videos in which he talks about making the Smash games, and he's pretty honest about how difficult they are to make. Also, in this interview, he talked about keeping franchises going forever, and if you want to do that, you need to change director eventually. In that interview, he does say that he doesn't know anyone yet who could take that role from him. This is something that Nintendo seems to be pretty aware of in recent years. We know that Splatoon was made by a team of younger game devs, and more Nintendo seems to try to put younger people in charge of their big franchises. So it seems like they're trying to train their next generation of game devs so that their older veterans can eventually retire. And Sakurai seems to be thinking about that for the Smash series. Now, the biggest reason why I think Sakurai is not going to be working on this next Smash game is because he's currently working on Kirby Air Riders, which is coming out later in 2025. And working on a Smash game is huge. There's no way that Sakurai is able to juggle both Kirby Air Riders and Smash at the same time. And there's also no way that Nintendo is willing to wait until Air Riders is done and then have Sakurai start working on a new Smash game from scratch. Because that would mean that we would have to wait 4, 5, or maybe 6 years for the next Smash game, and that would be way too late in the Switch 2 life. I think that Ultimate proved how successful the DLC releases are. Not just for actual sales of those DLCs, but it also kept Smash Ultimate relevant for years after launch. It's basically free publicity every time that there's a new character revealed for Smash. It got everyone talking about it, and I think it's one of the big reasons why Ultimate is the best-selling game in the franchise by far. So I'm pretty sure that Nintendo will want to keep following this format and focus a lot on DLC for the next Smash game, but for that to be relevant, they need Smash to come out relatively early in the life of the console so that they can maximize the attention from all the DLCs over multiple years of the Switch 2 life. So I'm pretty sure that there's already a team that has been working on the next Smash game, and my guess is they'll want to launch this probably within the second year of the Switch 2. So with all that said, I think that Sakurai will not be the director of the next Smash game. It might make sense if he was a consultant or a producer on this game, but he seems so involved with every single decision that I wonder if he can be involved in a Smash game without taking over everything and wanting to micromanage stuff. I'm very curious to see how this will turn out. So if Sakurai is not directing the next Smash, what direction will they take with this game? The big question that people are arguing about online is if Nintendo will just take Smash Ultimate, add a few characters, a few levels, and launch it as is. But other people think that this might also be a reboot of the franchise, where they change a lot of the game systems, cut a ton of characters, and redesign some of the classic characters that have been there since the first game. And this is why I can't wait to know more about this next Smash game. This suspense is killing me, and these two directions are so different from each other that it will really affect this franchise moving forward. So the people that think that they will just make a Smash Ultimate Deluxe think that this will be the case for a few reasons. They think that Nintendo will not want to remove characters because that would be unappealing for the general public and it will end up selling less copies. Their mentality is that if this game had 70 characters, why would fans want to buy this one that only has 20 characters? Another argument is that when they were planning to make a new Smash game for the Wii, which turned out to be Brawl, Iwata asked Sakurai to return as a game director, and he told him that if he didn't want to direct the next Smash game, they would just take Melee as is, add a few characters, few levels, and launch it like this. So it seems logical to think that if Sakurai is not gonna direct the next Smash, maybe Nintendo will just take Ultimate as is and do the same thing. Finally, another argument would be that Ultimate is the best-selling game in the franchise, and so they would want to stay as close to it as they can instead of risking things and making a reboot. But me personally, I actually think that they will go with the reboot route, or at least I hope they will. And here are my reasons for thinking that it will be the case. For my first point, I have to admit that this is kind of a personal opinion, but I think that they pushed the Smash formula as hard as they could with Ultimate. Smash as we know it will be hard to expand upon after Ultimate. It has so many characters, so many levels, and it feels like just adding a few of these things will not feel fresh anymore. And when I look at Nintendo in general, I think that they don't love to just copy-paste games. If you look at a franchise like Zelda, Mario, and recently even Mario Kart, they do take big risks and change the way these franchises are played. I think they love to shake things up, so especially with a franchise as important as Smash, I feel like it would be really anti-Nintendo to just grab Ultimate as is and add a few things and launch that. Another point is that Sakurai mentioned that for Ultimate, it was a nightmare to get the licenses for all the third-party characters, and it's not guaranteed that they can do it again. So already, if the goal is to keep Smash Ultimate as is, but one or two third-party characters cannot make it in, it kind of ruins the whole vision. Now another point is, like I said, I'm pretty sure that DLC will play a crucial role in the next Smash game once again. But if your base roster is already 70 characters, and then you add a few characters at the game's launch, then it becomes extremely hard to make worthwhile additions via DLC. All the important characters are already there, and it's gonna make these new characters feel kind of less big of a deal because there's already so many characters. However, if the next Smash game has less characters, every DLC addition will be a big deal, and they can even add back characters that were cut from Ultimate. Now, I'm not saying I love this idea because obviously it can feel like we're repaying characters that should have been in from the get-go, but just trying to analyze how DLC will play a big part in the next Smash game, I wouldn't be surprised that this is something that could happen. Finally, don't forget that people can still play Smash Ultimate already on Switch 2. So if you can already play that game with all these characters, isn't it a bit less exciting to rebuy the exact same game with just a few extra characters on Switch 2? I feel like this is the perfect opportunity for them to actually take a chance and reboot the franchise, and if people are missing some of the old characters that were cut, they can play them at any time by still playing Smash Ultimate on Switch 2. So yeah, personally, I hope that Nintendo will be bold and rethink Smash for this next installment, and I'm very aware that this is the kind of wish that can backfire pretty badly. It's possible that they change the franchise and I end up hating it and I preferred the way it was before, but I think if you don't take risks, that's how franchises get stagnant and lose relevance over time. So personally, I think now is a good time to try something new with the Smash franchise. It's hard to build upon Ultimate, which is already so big, and you know, for a lot of people that are thinking that a reboot with less characters makes no sense, I think it does make sense, because if you look at the latest character that were added in Smash Ultimate, and I'm talking about mostly the DLC characters, they're actually very interesting. They have a lot of cool comeback mechanics, they have a lot of bold ideas. But when you look back at the original characters from the first Smash games, they carried their super simple moveset through all those games, and they feel very outdated now. But imagine Link or Mario designed from the ground up today with the kind of bold ideas that they have been using for DLC characters. I feel like there's definitely room to grow with these characters, and even if the roster is smaller but every character has more depth and they add some cool game mechanics, it could be a very successful Smash game. So what do you guys think? Do you think they'll just take Ultimate, add a few things, and launch that? Or will they reboot the game and redesign a lot of characters? Let me know in the comments what you think and we can talk about this more. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I hope we'll hear more about the next Smash game very soon. Have a great day and see you next time.